I should be recording here. Okay. So. That is not the set for this week. So that's okay. So we'll put those aside and we'll go through this. Okay. Morning. So, Young, what do you think?
It's folliculum.
Yeah, trichofolliculoma, because you have a central infundibulum-like space. And radiating from that, you have all the little baby follicles. You have mama follicle and all the little baby follicles radiating off. So trichofolliculoma. Okay. So, Lindsay, here's a tumor.
So I see some shadow cells, I think.
So you have basaloid cells. First off, let's get ourselves in focus here.
Basaloid cells look like they're turning into pinker cells that are shadow cells. Looks like it's pretty well circumscribed.
We're going to color. Whoa. Okay. So one of the things you should do is, first off, the bottom aperture should be open all the way, otherwise things never look in focus. And then with your condenser flipped up, close your lower aperture, and then you've got to crank your condenser until your light source, if you look there, looks like a little stop sign. The way it was, like this, you would never be able to get into sharp focus. So your light source has to look like that. Okay, now everything will be in focus. So everything you said was absolutely correct. That you see basaloid cells, and they are maturing to shadow cells.
So that's a
or
pilomatricoma.
ghost cells. So that is pilomatrical keratinization. So you see basaloid cells there, pilomatrical keratinization there, so that is a pilomatricoma. Very good.
Okay, so lots of basaloid cells, clefts within the stroma.
So there's no retraction space between the tumor and stroma as there would be in a basal cell. Instead, there's clefting within the stroma. There's a fibroblast-rich, concentric stroma similar to what one would see in around a hair follicle. Right? And there are these collections of plump fibroblasts over here. What would you call such collections?
What's the thing? Mesenchymal body.
Yeah, papillary mesenchymal bodies, because they're like what's the mesenchyme that's in the dermal papilla of the hair follicle. So, and people who've done the online lectures point out that apparently I really like papillary mesenchymal bodies and point them out. But they are, the stroma is what differentiates a benign pilar tumor from a basal cell. The basaloid islands themselves can look identical, right? So it's the stroma that tells them apart. No retraction space in the stroma, concentric fibroblast rich, stroma, papillary mesenchymal bodies within the stroma. So this would be, you could call it a trichoep or trichoblastoma. Trichoblastoma is the overall rubric, and then the well-differentiated ones within that are trichoepithelioma.
So we were talking during the going over unknowns about like differentiating it by how superficial versus deep it is?
Yeah,
Is that-
the ones that are deep soft tissue tumors are all trichoblastomas.
Okay.
The superficial ones, some people call those all trichoep. The ones that are less well differentiated, some people call those trichoblastoma.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. It would not be fair to have both of those as a choice because they're both correct, right? So either one. All trichoeps are trichoblastomas, but the trichoblastomas are the well differentiated ones. I'm sorry, the trichoepithelioma are well differentiated trichoblastomas. I think I said that right. Okay.
So, I see a lot of shadow cells.
A lot of shadow cells, which suggests,
The pilomatricoma.
so that suggests pilomatrical differentiation, and they can calcify, and then in this case you have some osteoid formation. So when there's osteoid forming, the residents like to joke that then you get to say it's a bona fide example of a pilomatricoma. Right? Bona fide. Very funny. Okay.
A little shape biopsy.
A little shaped biopsy in the center.
Sebaceous gland.
Yeah, so you have kind of a hair follicle with big sebaceous units hanging off it, and then you have a lot of stroma around that.
So the follicular sebaceous cystic hamartoma.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a variant of follicular sebaceous cystic hamartoma, and the stroma can kind of resemble neurofibroma. Then they're called neurofollicular hamartoma, but it's not S100 positive. It's not really there's nothing neuro about it. It is the same kind of stroma that's around all pilar tumors. It's CD34 positive, just like normal follicular sheath.
Is this trichofolliculoma?
It is a trichofolliculoma. So you have to recognize trichofolliculoma when it's cut vertically, and you have to recognize it when it's cut tangentially, right? So this is a tangential cut, and you have all the little babies radiating inward, but it's just a horizontal cut rather than a vertical cut. Well done, but it didn't fool you. You did just fine. Okay, so Shirley, what do you think?
Looks like a cyst.
Looks kind of like a cyst, and then radiating from the cyst are tiny little follicle-like fingers.
Trichofolliculoma.
Yeah, if they are fully formed follicles, it's a trichofolliculoma. If they are tiny little strands from a central pore blackhead-like opening, it's pore Weiner. And if they're fatter fingers, then it's pilar sheath acanthoma. They're all related. They all have the same architecture. It's little fingers radiating inward towards the central follicular infundibulum. In the case of pilar sheath acanthoma, there are fat squamous fingers. In a pore Weiner, they're skinny squamous fingers. And in a trichofolliculoma, they are fully developed follicles.
There are some data with liver levels is sign out. Is that where?
They're over
In path.
over on the path side.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, I know
It's pretty cramped, so they say
And
over
you-
here.
how. Oh, they're already cramped. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You can be wherever you would like to be.
I'll hang out here since I'm here.
Okay. So I Here we
This
go.
one, so this one I see like basaloid islands, like with clear cells within it. It's like a sebaceoma.
So basaloid islands. So one of the hints for a sebaceoma is sebaceoma will be a blue tumor and will have round red ducts that are very prominent. So it's a blue ball full of round red ducts. Do you see prominent red ducts in here? Not really, right? The other thing is this one is pigmented, and it would be rare for a sebaceous tumor to pigment. But it certainly palisades. You have a concentric fibroblast-rich stroma. It's made of basaloid cells. So a big ball of basaloid cells, concentric fibroblast-rich stroma.
Trichoepithelioma.
Yeah, sort of
Swiss
into,
cheese.
but this one is a big enough ball. Some people would say trichoblastoma because it's just sort of a uniform big mass rather than being little fingers like trichoeps. But as you pointed out, trichoeps can have a Swiss cheese appearance, so-called cribriform appearance. So that would be, either way is fine. To call it trichoblast or trichoep, either one's fine. Okay, David, are you passing or playing?
I'll play. Either way. I think this is one earlier. It looks like it kind of has that pilar look, that like concentric fibroblast-rich stroma with basaloid palisading, and in the middle, these probably like lymphocytes in there.
Probably lymphs and histiocytes.
So like a lymphadenoma.
So this is cutaneous lymphadenoma. So lymphadenoma, the stroma looks just like any other pilar tumor, as you pointed out. There are even papillary mesenchymal bodies in there. Everyone's favorite. The basaloid cells are just 1 or 2 layers thick, and then the center of every island is lymphocytes and histiocytes. That's a cutaneous lymphadenoma. If you want a easier name, adamantinoid trichoblastoma is also a name for it. But cutaneous lymphadenoma is what most people call it. And they're totally benign and easily recognizable. Okay, Falion, what do you think your differentiation is here?
I see the sebacites.
So there are definite sebocytes.
Yes, so I think it's space adenoma or spaceoma.
So sebaceous adenoma is usually big round ball, can be usually about 50-50 differentiated sebocytes and undifferentiated basal cells.
Yes, so I prefer spaceoma.
Sebaceoma are usually a big blue ball with red ducts. This one doesn't have so much in the way of red ducts, and it looks like it is growing in little islands down into the dermis, which would then be worrisome for carcinoma. So you put it absolutely in the right bucket. This one is very well differentiated. So I think many people would have the same question you had. It's well differentiated, but it has a little bit of an infiltrative growth pattern. How to classify it? Probably best to be on the cautious side and remove it because of the infiltrative growth pattern. Okay, that's your biopsy.
So these are basaloid cells in the dermis.
So basaloid cells, so it's a basal cell carcinoma, right?
No, I don't think so.
So why not basal cell carcinoma?
This this white spaces are after the collagen rather than between the base.
Correct.
basoid
So
cells.
there's no retraction space adjacent to the epithelium. It's all splits within the stroma. The stroma is concentric, fibroblast rich. There are these plump gray collections of papillary mesenchymal bodies. There are horn cysts. There's granuloma where horn cyst has ruptured. So this is,
The trichoblastoma.
yeah, or this one you might call a trichoep, superficial well-differentiated trichoblastoma. Either name is fine for it.
So it looks broad.
It's broad.
There
Do you see any terminal hairs?
is,
So it's bald. Is it papillomatous?
it is.
So it's bumpy.
So it's a nevus sebaceous.
So it's broad, bald, bumpy, and bubbly. So it is a nevus sebaceous of Hiata-san. Very good. What do they look like prior to puberty?
They don't have the bumpiness.
Correct. They're flat and they don't have the sebaceous and they don't have the apocrine. It's just little primordial hair germs lined up in a row. But they are broad and they are bald at that age. They become bumpy and bubbly at puberty. And that is a badly faded slide that we're going to have to re-stain. So we're just going to set that aside. Okay.
So, it looks like a mama and her babies.
A mama and her baby, so that is
Trichofollicular.
trichofolliculoma. Very good. Okay, what's this one?
Trichoadenoma.
Trichoadenoma. Looks like red Cheerios or red eyeglasses. Trichoadenoma. Very well done.
See basoid cells with pilometrical differentiation.
So basaloid cells, they undergo pilometrical differentiation. So what would you call an oma with pilometrical differentiation?
I correct that with the pilometrical.
Pilometricoma. This is just a tiny little, that's the world's smallest pilometricoma right there.
Paisley tie pattern.
Paisley tie pattern. See, I wore the wrong tie today. I should have worn a paisley tie, right? So
And
it has a central dell and prominent horn cyst. So what if this were a stable, pale, donut-like lesion on a young woman's cheek?
desmoplastic trichoepithelioma.
But I lied. The history is this is actually many tiny little papules on the eyelids of a child with Down syndrome.
Syringoma.
But I lied. I'm actually an old man, and I have a slowly progressive scar-like lesion on my forehead.
Morphea.
Morpheoform BCC, but I lied. I'm actually a 50-year-old man, and I have a red plaque-like lesion on my upper lip. Microcystic adnexal carcinoma. So what have we learned? Number one, I'm a liar, right? And number two, clinical pathologic correlation for the Paisley tie differential. This one you can tell is more of a plaque lesion. It has a central dell. It came from the cheek of a young woman. So that's a DTE, desmoplastic trichoepithelioma. Remember, in terms of distribution, a MAC, microcystic adnexal carcinoma, tends to be upper lip and chin, right where the sauce of a Big Mac hits you. So that's easy to remember. Right. Okay, and this is pale.
I see like pale cells almost hanging off from the dermis.
Yes, and they are not epithelial. All you have is stromal cells.
Like a tricholoma or tricholemma.
So trichomoma would be epithelial, right? This is a ball-like collection. It looks like the world's largest papillary mesenchymal body sitting there just by itself. That's what's been called a trichodiscoma. So trichodiscoma is just the stromal.
Oh, it's like a fibrofolliculoma without the.
It's the fibrofolliculoma caught in a planar section where you don't see all the strands. Absolutely correct. Well done. Okay. David, so tell me about this oma.
This has that pilometrical differentiation, maybe. How about a verrucous cyst? Sometimes they have that.
So,
Pilometrical.
what if we were looking for
Red V's.
so that looks almost like a proximal nail fold
Mm-hmm.
right there, and then you got another one right here, and sort of another minor one there.
You got
and here.
onychomatricoma?
This is an onychomatricoma. So onychomatricoma, it's onycholemal differentiation,
Okay.
and they look like multiple proximal nail folds. What does it look like grossly?
Like a honeycomb
Yeah.
pattern.
So it's a dystrophic nail, but when you look at it from the end, there are longitudinal tunnels all through it. And if you ever have a nail plate that looks like that, you don't even have to do a biopsy. It's an onychomatricoma. So longitudinal tunnels in a dystrophic nail plate. Okay. So what's the overall configuration?
Like inner cyst.
Yeah, like a cyst, and then differentiation.
Inner root sheath.
So there's inner root sheath with trichohyalin, red trichohyalin granules,
Yes.
and there's clearly outer root sheath as well.
So it's
So it's, you are correct. It is a cystic panfolliculoma. Now, up above, you have exactly the same tumor, but it connects to the epidermis. That's an epidermal panfolliculoma. So epidermal panfolliculoma, cystic panfolliculoma, just like the name implies, it is panfollicular differentiation. So there are areas that look tricholemal, there are areas that look like pilomatricoma, there are areas with red trichohyalin granules, so it's all portions of the hair follicle in a panfolliculoma. That one's a little faded. So we gotta set these aside. We got to restate those. Differentiation
It looks sebaceous to
looks
me.
sebaceous. If it were a blue ball with striking red ducts, you'd say that one would be a sebaceoma, right? This one doesn't have such striking red ducts. And is it more differentiated sebaceous or more basaloid?
It's more basaloid.
And so some people call these sebaceous epithelioma when it's pretty well-defined lobule, but it's much more than 50% basaloid. Some people will use that term, sebaceous epithelioma. They do fall within the spectrum of Muratori tumors. So what does the Muratori syndrome include?
Keratoacanthomas,
Keratoacanthomas,
spacious tumors,
sebaceous tumors,
and gut carcinomas.
and gut carcinoma, high grade or low grade?
I think low grade.
They're low grade, and it's allelic to Lynch syndrome, which is hereditary non-polyposis gut carcinoma. Most gut carcinomas grow out of polyps, right? Villus adenomatous polyps. But you can have autosomal dominant gut carcinoma that doesn't start with a polyp. That's Lynch syndrome. And Myrturi is one subset of Lynch where they have the cutaneous markers.
So it looks sebaceous.
And how much basaloid?
Very little.
Very little. So this is,
So this would be the adenoma, sebaceous,
or just hyperplasia.
Okay.
Sebaceous hyperplasia, where it's just,
How do you tell the
very.
difference?
Adenoma has up to 50% basaloid cells.
Okay.
This had almost no basaloid cells. This one.
Okay, so this looks toasted oats. Oh,
Yeah, you can say toasted oats. That's because the publisher wouldn't let us say Cheerios back then.
we had to look up toasted oats. I was like,
They
I don't
didn't
know
want
what
a
that is.
brand name, and then later publishers said that was stupid. But the original publisher didn't want a brand name there, so it couldn't say Cheerios. So it had to be toasted oat cereal, right? Or eyeglasses. Some people say. So this is
Trichoadenoma.
trichoadenoma. Very good.
Some have sebaceous glands and then blue strands showing polymetrical differentiation. And kind of a fibrous orb.
So
Fibrofolliculoma or the folliculosebaceous?
So, folliculosebaceous cystic hamartoma never makes hair fibers.
Okay.
Either does a fibrofolliculoma. There's a hair. So if these are all fully formed follicles,
The trichofolliculoma?
yeah. So if it's fingers of fully formed follicles forming follicular fibers, then it's the folliculoma. Right?
Okay.
So fingers fully formed follicles, folliculoma, to help you remember that. So trichofolliculoma has the fully formed follicles and they form follicular fibers, so they're making hair. Right? Clinically, it's a bump with a tuft of hair coming out of it.
This is another pilometricoma.
Another pilometricoma, you certainly have shadow cell differentiation.
Basaloid cells and fibroblast-rich stroma, trichoepithelioma or trichoblastoma.
And what is that big thing there? Those plump gray cells forming a ball.
Oh,
There's another one here. Those are the famous papillary mesenchymal bodies that are normal in that stroma. Well done.
Pilometricoma.
Pilometricoma, why?
You have like the pilometrical differentiation.
So basaloid cells,
Cells.
and
and some
then
ghost
they form ghost cells. So pilometrical keratinization, very good. Someone pass that easy button over here.
That was easy.
Well done.
The trichoblastoma, it's a little deeper blue.
Yeah, so this is something that's deep, soft tissue, right? It's not in the dermis. And it is a big tumor composed of blue cells, but there's clefting in the stroma. There is a lace-like pattern. there are, if you look around, probably some papillary mesenchymal bodies in the stroma. And you are correct, it's a big soft tissue trichoblastoma. So everyone calls the big soft tissue ones trichoblastoma, and the more solid ones superficial. Some people call those trichoblastoma too. If you want to call all the superficial ones trichoep, that's okay. No one will yell at you.
Oh, me. So it's hard to recognize. I can see the follicular and the finger connected to the follicle. But it's several follicular like this, and so if it's just one follicle, I think it may be the parachis.
Acanthoma. Very well done. We need an easy button over here.
That was easy.
There you go. Thank you.
That was easy.
So it is more pink than blue, like a trichoadenoma. It's differentiating up towards the infundibulum, so it's more pink than blue. And this one is very acanthotic, fat fingers radiating everywhere out, essentially, but they're not forming fibers. They're not forming hair fibers. So that is a pilar sheath acanthoma.
But it presents many.
But it's many of them. They're all radiating out. So they often are many like that, multiple. And that is probably too small, so we're going to pass on that one. We're going to go to...
It looks sebaceous.
Looks sebaceous. And then, what do you think about the mitoses and the nuclei and the pleomorphism?
It's probably sebaceous carcinoma.
This is sebaceous carcinoma in anybody's book, right? So that's sebaceous carcinoma. Most common place we see sebaceous carcinoma.
On the face?
Yep, head and neck, especially eyelid. And then very commonly it gets into the epidermis and mimics Bowen's disease. So if you're on the eyelid and you have something that looks like Bowen's disease, think sebaceous, get some kind of sebaceous marker. So what kind of markers can you use for sebaceous differentiation?
I think like something with glycogen.
That's more tricholemal
Okay.
differentiation, but sebaceous differentiation, you can do EMA. So EMA is a good marker for sebaceous differentiation. Epithelial membrane antigen, EMA. The other one that's a very good marker for epithelial or for sebaceous differentiation is factor 13A as a nuclear stain. So 13A is more recently appreciated as a sebaceous marker, and EMA is the traditional one. Okay, how about this?
So, desmoplastic tricholemoma.
Desmoplastic trichomoma. So why is it a trichomoma?
Like really clear cells hanging off the...
So lobules of clear cells hanging off the epidermis. How does it differ from a clear cell acanthoma?
So, clear cell acanthoma is like super well demarcated and more...
And does it
within
hang
the-
off the
No.
epidermis? It
Kind of
is the epidermis, right? So clear cell acanthoma is a portion of the epidermis. This has a normal epidermis over top of it, and then it hangs down from that. It always palisades. It's composed of clear cells. It has a thick, glassy basement membrane zone just beyond the palisade. And when there's been a folliculitis and you get sclerotic stroma in it, then it's a desmoplastic trichomoma.
Very good.
And multiple trichomomas can be markers for
Powder.
Cowden syndrome, inheritance, autosomal dominant. And what do you get?
Breast cancer, follicular thyroid cancer.
And is the breast cancer high grade or low grade?
I'll go low grade. High grade.
It's the opposite. It's high grade, terrible, horrible. Treatment for a Cowden's family for the girls is early prophylactic bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction. Now they do the abdominal flaps where they take you end up with a little scar around your belly button because they take your whole abdomen, move it up, and rebuild. And other than a tiny little white scar around the areola and tiny little white scar around the belly button, you can't tell that they've had the surgery. It's amazing what they do with the reconstructions. And it is not hard to talk the women into it because their sister died of breast cancer, their mom died, their aunt died, their grandmother died, everyone died, and it was aggressive, horrible, widespread cancer at an early age. So,
Looks like lymphadenoma.
lymphadenoma, why is it a lymphadenoma?
It's got the basaloid cells kind of palisading with lymphocytes and histiocytes in the middle.
Yep, so it's got the peripheral one or two layers of basaloid cells, it's got the fibroblast-rich stroma, and it's got lymphs and histiocytes in the center, so it is a cutaneous lymphadenoma, or if you like the easy name, the adamantinoid trichoblastoma. Nobody likes that name. Trichoadenoma. It's Cheerios, eyeglasses, toasted oat, whatever. So first off, where do you think you are?
Scalp.
Scalp, and then what is this?
What's this?
Plenty of hair.
Yep.
In the center, is there any hair?
No. Epidermatosis.
And there are these little things that look kind of like attempts to make hair follicles. So it's broad, it's bald, but it's not bumpy and it's not bubbly.
Prepubertal
Pre-pubertal nevosebaceous oviaticin. That's correct. You get to hit the easy button.
That was easy.
Okay.
Seems it's a little hard.
So if you had to describe it
Well,
with this central cavity, you'd call it a cystic
yeah.
structure, right? And what's the differentiation here where it has a horn cyst?
Infundibular.
Infundibular. How about here where it has clear glycogenated areas? Tricholemal, but it also has hairs in it, so it clearly differentiates towards matrix as well. So do you know anything that's cystic that differentiates towards all portions of the hair follicle?
But I don't see the inner root sheath differentiation. If I see it, I will call it panfolliculoma.
So you are correct. You nailed it as a cystic panfolliculoma, which is good, even though you didn't see the trichohyalin granules. You still have definite evidence it's cystic. You have tricholemal differentiation. You have infundibular differentiation. You have hair fibers. So it is a panfolliculoma.
Even without the shape.
even without seeing the trichohyalin granules.
Okay.
They weren't there, but did that slow you down? Not at all.
Okay.
I see like a central pore, dilated pore of Weiner.
Yes, but you said it wrong. You have to whine when you say it. It's a whiner. Yeah, so you are correct. So Dr. Weiner, we should not make fun of his name. He was a very accomplished man. So that is the pore of Weiner. Okay.
It looks a little bit warty overall.
Looks a little warty.
Maybe trichomoma.
So it
Palisade.
definitely has clear cells. It hangs down from the epidermis. It has a peripheral palisade. You can see that little blue line. And next to that, the pink line, which is the basement membrane zone. So that is, in fact, a trichomoma. Very good.
It's magic. It's
Yep.
magicoma.
Pilomatricoma. You see the basaloid cells and you see the shadow cell differentiation. So pilomatricoma. Very good.
So I see basaloid cells that are pretty light and bland and hanging from the epidermis, so I'd call it trichomoma.
You are correct. It's the little trichomoma.
So, is it another trichomoma? It's kind of clear cells. Or is that sebaceous? That's
Looks
sebaceous.
sebaceous.
Okay, so sebaceous epithelioma.
So some people may call it adenoma epithelioma.
Sebaceous.
Also because it's bluer and it has red circular ducts, some might call it sebaceoma. As long as you call it benign sebaceous, you're doing pretty well. Yeah, you guys have nailed these pretty well. Well done.
See sebaceous ducts down below. It looks broad.
Do you see any terminal hairs?
I do not.
It probably was bald.
Yeah, that's a nevus sebaceous.
It's probably a piece of the nevus sebaceous. And then what happens with nevus sebaceous? Anything grow in them?
Yes. You can get trichoblastoma.
Yeah, all kinds of things. Syringocystadenoma papilliferum, trichoblastomas. If you have what looks like an entire textbook of dermatopathology with all the adnexal tumors all together in one place, it happened in an organoid nevus, which is the other name for nevus sebaceous. At this.
It's pigmented. Trichoepithelioma.
So it's pigmented. Does it have a pilar stroma?
Not really.
So does it have a fibroblast-rich concentric stroma?
No, it's more fibromyxoid maybe.
It's more fibromyxoid, right? And it's pink strands with blue buds.
So, the type of BCC, infundibulocystic.
So infundibulocystic BCC, or what pilar benign tumor looks just like infundibulocystic BCC?
Basaloid hamartoma.
Basaloid follicular hamartoma. So if you have a families, dad, uncle, sons, they all have bumps all over their body, and all their bumps look like infundibular cystic BCC, but they don't progress like basal cell. That's basaloid follicular hamartoma. Sometimes it's loss of heterozygosity, and you've got a Blaschkoid streak. So you've got a Blaschkoid linear segment that's all these bumps, and they all look like infundibular cystic BCC, but they don't progress. They just sit there. That's basaloid follicular hamartoma. Okay, how about this one? Where do you think you are?
This is scalp again. There's see plenty of sebaceous glands.
Is the top flat or is it papillomatous?
Papillomatous with apocrine glands in the dermis. So post-pubertal, nevus sebaceous.
So this is probably right around puberty, right? The sebaceous glands aren't very big, but it's starting to get a little bumpy, and it's right around the age where kids start to get a little smelly, and because they're developing apocrine glands, and the apocrine glands at the same time they develop in your armpits, they develop in the nevus sebaceous as well. So adrenarche is usually the first part of puberty, so kids start to get smelly before other things happen, and so that's the same thing in the tumors.
Shadow cells.
Lots of shadow cells. Pilomatricoma. Yeah, very good. The only thing you should have added is don't waste my time. Right? Pilomatricoma, don't waste my time.
See a bunch of basaloid islands.
Basaloid islands, the striated muscles, so you're obviously head and neck. It has a little bit of sebaceous differentiation too, but most of it is basaloid islands. Describe the stroma.
It's like a reddish pink.
Red, ropey collagen, lots of fibroblasts, concentric clefts within the stroma.
See trichoepithelioma?
Yeah, so trichoep or superficial trichoblastoma, because it's all part, it differentiates towards the pilar sebaceous unit. You can get a little apocrine differentiation or a little sebaceous differentiation in pilar tumors. You name the tumor for the predominant differentiation, which in this case is pilar, because that's what's going to define the behavior of the tumor.
Some pilomatrical differentiation right there. It's getting a little busy in some areas. Like malignant pilomatricoma, or just
probably just pilomatricoma. Malignant pilomatricomas tend to be extremely large, and they have a very infiltrative border and pretty high-grade atypia. So they're not a subtle tumor usually.
Okay.
So just a big pilomatricoma. Okay, how about this? So either a big trichofolliculoma, or this could be a cystic panfolliculoma if you see other areas of differentiation. You clearly have trichohyalin granules, but you're not really making hair fibers going into this particular one. Some areas where it's getting close. So either a big cystic trichofolliculoma or a cystic panfolliculoma would be best designations for that one.
I see a cyst-like structure.
Yep.
basaloid cells are turning into.
Do you see basaloid cells? Or is it all kind of pink and then undergoing abrupt keratinization?
The pilar cyst.
Like a pilar cyst. And so why is it called a pilar cyst? Because it, mimics pilar keratinization, tricholimal keratinization within pilar. And many of them, it's a follicle-like structure when it starts and then opens into a cyst. So well done.
So it's a pilomatricoma.
Why is it a pilomatricoma?
There's basaloid cells and then shadow cells.
So basaloid cells and shadow cells. So you're correct. That is exactly why it's a pilomatricoma. Okay, what's this?
This is a Neva sebaceous.
Neva sebaceous. What's all of this kind of weird sweat gland tumor in it? The answer is it's a weird little sweat gland tumor, right? So can you get little secondary tumors of all sorts in Neva sebaceous? Sure you can. Right. Are they ever malignant? Rarely. Even if they're funny looking, they're usually benign.
Really eosinophilic stroma. Looks. The stroma surrounding the hair follicle and the tumor island. It's a trichoblastoma.
So it is a big basaloid tumor. The only cleftings in the stroma. It has a concentric fibroblast-rich stroma. It's a big ball, so you are correct. It is a big trichoblastoma. So if you saw this on a patient, what would you call it?
Hyperkeratosis.
Yeah, massive hyperkeratosis forming a column. So it's a cutaneous horn,
Cancer.
right? And what is the keratinization in this horn? Fairly abrupt keratinization, similar to what you would see in a pilar cyst. So do you know any horn that has tricholimal keratinization? A tricholimal horn. Right? So tricholimal horn is a cutaneous horn. It's a benign pilar tumor forming a cutaneous horn. It has tricholimal keratinization. It's called tricholimal horn. A pretty descriptive name. And those are benign.
Trichoadenoma.
Trichoadenoma. The only thing you should have added was, don't waste my time. Very good. Very good.
Like basaloid islands with clear space. I'd say like sebaceous.
So,
I see the concentric. Did you see like a trichoepithelioma?
So you see concentric fibrosis, and it's pigmented, which sebaceous rarely is, but pilar things commonly are. So probably a big, trichoblastoma or trichoep because it's superficial.
Little blue basaloid islands.
And the stroma?
The concentric fibroblast stroma. So maybe some kind of like a trichoepithelium.
Yep, exactly. So that's trichoep. This is a trichoep. The one's more the one has more epithelial, the other has more stroma and smaller islands, but they all have basaloid islands, peripheral palisade, concentric fibroblast-rich stroma, papillary mesenchymal bodies. So the themes are all there, they're just in different proportions. Pilomatricoma because of the shadow cells. Shadow cell differentiation. Okay, you just went through and at high speed you did 90 examples of pilar tumors and you nailed every one successfully. That's exactly what you should be able to do, right? Because the pilar tumors are what we call bird book tumors. So let's go ahead and let's